So listen, we need to have a talk, a heart to heart between you and me about soil. Let's go. All right, so when it comes to your soil, a lot of people will compare their soil to a bank account. And I think this is a really good way of looking at things, because if you are making regular deposits into your bank account, you can make at a later time a withdrawal. And so if you go to buy a pair of shoes or want to take a vacation, you need money to do that. We're assuming there aren't such things as credit cards, right? But this is money in your bank account. And so if you don't have enough money, well, what happens? You can't take that vacation. You can't buy that pair of shoes. You cannot withdraw more than you have in your bank account. And that's why I love that example, because your soil is very much the same way. If you don't actually give back and put money or nutrients or fertility into your soil, how are you going to expect that at a later time you're going to get a bigger and better harvest? And that is ultimately the withdrawal that comes from your soil is a bigger, better harvest. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that analogy of comparing your soil to a bank account, because for me, it's really easy to visualize whatever I put in is what I can get out. But I wanted to add one more additional point to that analogy, because when you go to build a bank account, if I go to my local bank and I want to deposit money into my bank, I can take them whatever type of currency I want. If it's US dollars, I can take them a penny, I can take them a nickel, I can take them a dime, I can take them a quarter, I can take them $1, right? You can give them even more, 5, 10, 20, whatever. But we're gonna stick with coin money, right? We're gonna stick with coin money for this example, so you guys don't get too confused. The same thing applies to your garden. And a lot of gardeners think there's only one form of currency, one type of money to build your soil, and that's compost or organic material. And there's lots of things that you can do as a gardener that have varying levels of value to your soil. Hopefully that makes sense, because now we're going to get started, because there's a lot of ways that you can be building your soil, and they all have different valuations. All right, so the first form of currency that you can use to build your bank account in your soil is compost. Compost is the highest value. And so we're gonna start at the highest and go down to the lowest. But what I really love about this analogy of using money to kind of look at building your bank account of your soil is that there's an old saying that says, it all spends the same. You probably heard this saying. If you go and take 100 pennies and you go to buy something for $1, well, they'll probably tell you, I don't really care, it all spends the same. And that idea is so true with gardening as well. I'm gonna start with something worth $1 to your garden, but then as we move down the line, we're eventually gonna end up with something that's only worth about a penny. But you take 100 of those pennies, you can still build your soil. Because some people don't have access to nice, beautiful, fresh compost. They just don't. And I want to be understanding of that. And as gardeners, we also need to realize that there's a lot more than just one way to build your soil and end up with healthy soil in the long run that can overall give you a good yield, have a successful garden, and you can get a lot out of it. So with that being said, this is compost. This is worth $1. This is like the best thing you can possibly add to build your soil. And the reason being is, check this out. This stuff is incredible. I mean, this is just, wow. This is like, I could smell that all day, baby. That's amazing. This is organic material that's been broken down. This has released all of the available nutrients that plants need to grow. This has organic material, which is that sponginess that helps hold soil structure. This contains beneficial bacteria and fungi, which are super important and critical to overall plant health. And so this has everything in it. This is literally just the most bang for your buck. Now, the nice thing with compost too is the fact that because it's kind of all in one, you add compost and it will basically fix all the other problems. People have always said that compost is the cure-all for a garden. If it's too sandy, add compost. If it's too heavy in clay, add compost. You know, if your soil is just getting depleted over time, it needs more nutrients, add compost. And that's what I love so much about compost. All right, so the thing that's worth 25 cents to your garden is wood chip mulch. Now, a lot of you are going to say, well, how is this worth it to my garden? any less than, say, compost is? Because won't this break down and decompose and create compost? And the answer is yes, it definitely can. However, wood chips is one form of organic material, and it doesn't contain all of the nutrients that your plants need to thrive and survive. What's really nice about compost is way more balanced. It has things like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, trace minerals. It has a lot of other things, whereas wood chips has a lot of carbon, but not as much nitrogen. And that's often why it takes a lot of time to break down. Yes, it will break down, it will overall decompose, but it decomposes at such a slow rate that what it ultimately provides your soil once it breaks down. I love mulched walkways because that's building the overall soil of the garden, but it's really building the soil structure itself. It's not providing as much nutrients as it is providing structure, which is important, and it will break down and add some nutrients, just not as much as compost. But you can also mulch with anything else that can cover the soil that can slowly break down over time. You can mulch with things like cardboard. You can mulch with things like leaves. You can mulch with things like straw. You can mulch with a combination of any of them, right? As long as you have something that's going to break down over time, that can cover the soil, help to add, help to keep moisture in the soil, break down and add soil structure, you're going to be adding an overall net benefit to your garden. All right, and so now we're going to talk about the dime. This is worth 10 cents to your garden, and this is what we call chop and drop. So you have crops that are growing, right? This is kale. We've got a couple different varieties of kale here, and we're going to be eating from this kale. We use this kale in our salads, in stir fries. We juice it, we make smoothies with it. So we are going to be taking some nutrients away, but what we can do with some of the older leaves and even the plant tops is we can take them, and if they have like insect damage, I can take them and I can throw them right down on the soil. This is something that you can practice basically with any application. You can do this with literally any plant in the garden. You can do what's called chop and drop. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to deposit back the nutrients that were taken out initially. All of these, all of this dead plant material here, it's all going to get composted back eventually. And so all of the nutrients that went into growing that plant matter can be returned. What's going to sell it short is that it will add overall organic material. It will add some nutrients, but you're not really building the soil structure very fast, because the soil structure is going to be what it was, and then you're going to add a little bit, just a little bit back. So the organic plant material that you're adding will benefit, but it won't benefit a ton. And so basically what we're doing is we're consuming, we're taking this kale and we're eating it. And those are nutrients that are entering our body that are never going to make it back into the garden. It's good kale. But that being said, chopping and dropping is a great way to just return all that unused plant material back into your garden. It will add up over time, but you got to add a lot of it. All right, so now we're going to talk about the nickel of the garden, and that is leaving remaining plant roots in the soil even after you pull the plants up. So we got this basil here, and this basil has since been killed off because we had a frost. Well, we've had freezes too, but I'm just breaking off the tops, and this can go into the compost pile, whereas the plant roots can stay in the soil. And so even if you end up throwing away the tops, even if you never have any compost at all, you're leaving the plant roots in the soil, which are going to do a couple things. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to add some organic material that are going to break down, and it will build the soil in a small way. The second thing it's going to do, it's going to continue to add overall soil structure, because what the roots do is they actually hold little air gaps that help keep the soil loose and fluffy so it's not compacting and deflating. And that's really important to having overall healthy soil. Now, when you actually go to plant next year, by that time, most of those plant roots will have broken down, and you really won't even know that they're there. So it's not too much of a hassle to leave them in the soil. Now, if you have something like perennials, obviously, you can't really do this with perennials because they're never really going to break down. You want them to come back year after year. So this only applies to annuals, but nevertheless, this is a really great way to slowly build your soil over time and even just kind of retain the soil structure that's there. And now we're going to talk about the penny of the garden. And I've got some pennies right here. So the penny of the garden is bagged soil. Now, bagged soil is not the worst thing in the world by any means. I've got some in my garden and I use it in a pinch when I need it. You see, when we have to fill up a bed really quickly, and we have some compost that is working on being finished, but it's not finished just yet, but I've got to fill my bed up because I need to plant something new, I will sometimes turn to bagged compost. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's certainly far from the best. It'll take a lot of these bags to build your soil. And the reason is because this soil has already been fully broken down, but it's also been sifted. And in some cases, it's got a lot of filler, like things like sand, that really won't add any tremendous net.
Accidentally leaned on the power button for the microphone, so this next shot doesn't have any audio at all, but it's okay because it's going to be my application into mime school, which I've always wanted to become a mime, so hopefully they accept me. But nevertheless, just finishing up this clip because I wanted to kind of just say that I do use bagged soil. Don't use it all the time, but I do use it when it's needed, and I generally need it when I'm kind of in between compost cycles. So in between spring and summer and fall, there's sometimes just time when I don't have compost available, so I end up using bagged soil. And it's not the worst thing in the world, and if it's all you have, that's fine. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you grow big or go home, and we'll catch you guys later. All right, take care. Bye.